Well, welcome to another installment of Different Dadpreneurs. Excited to chat with Joel Klettke today, who is the co-founder of Case Study Buddy, which was acquired. And we had a really great chat a couple weeks ago now about the stages after acquisition, where you're at, and also just what dads are needing right now and get some gaps in what you're noticing. So I'm excited to get into your world, hear a little bit of your story, and yeah, jam out on some dadpreneur stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get to it.
So I'd love to start with just maybe setting some context and backstory of where you're coming from. And maybe we'll start with your entry point into entrepreneurship. What was your first kind of entrepreneurial part of your journey?
Yeah. So I was an entrepreneur before I kind of realized it. When I was like 17, 18, I think I was 17 at first because I needed my partner to be the one to sign the papers. That's how early this was. My first like entrepreneurial venture was called Mammoth Productions, and we were just putting on local shows. Like I was in bands and we like bringing bands to town. And so we had a business before we even realized, I never really thought of it as a business. And then reflecting, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, like I guess I am kind of entrepreneurial. And then I was continually kind of like an entrepreneur by accident. So in university, I originally majored in HR because I had no idea like what I actually wanted to do. And I read an article or something that was like, HR people can make this certain range of money. I'm like, that sounds fine. But in my first year, immediately realized like, oh no, this is not it. And enrolled in the entrepreneurship program there at U of C. That was a realization more about the kinds of people I like to be around, even than a recognition of this being what I wanted to do. Like I like being around people who were planning and building and trying and taking risks. So from there, out of university, fell backwards into a job at a digital agency. I had always loved to write. I just never saw a career path in it. I'm, doing marketing classes. It never really clicked that like, hey, this could be a business. You can write marketing material. Like none of that registered for me. But after a few years in the agency, that light bulb came on. And I was like, oh, yeah, someone's got to write the sites and the ads and the content and all of that. So in 2013, my first like grown up entrepreneurship effort, I went out on my own in business casual copywriting and, totally different context to where I was later on. So back then it was, you're young and nobody cares if you work from 7 a.m. till, 2 a.m. And I got so much passion and motivation and joy out of doing that and out of the grind. Like I genuinely love to be in the mix and at the desk and answering emails and all of that. And so, I was pretty successful pretty quickly there. I hit the right niche at the right time. Some time into that, this side project emerged, Case Study Buddy. I had this idea for a team-based business. I wanted something that could be bigger than myself and wanted something that, I wanted new chances to learn. And also, I was starting to like life was starting to be at a bit of a different pace. At that point, I'd already had one of my kids. I've got three now. And so I started to think a little bit different about the future. Like after getting married, that was like the first reality check. Like, oh, some things got to change. Having a kid again, some things got to change. I'm sure we'll get more into this. But Case Study Buddy started as a side project. Just before the pandemic, it became a full-time focus. And so that's kind of the trajectory from like falling backwards into jobs to going out on my own to having this idea and then chasing it down with a partner to selling that business of March of this past year. Like a good decade long journey, decade plus long journey there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
lots going on.
And so, yeah, share a little bit more about the timing of the copywriting business with the emerging Case Study Buddy with your kids. Like, what was the sequence of that and kind of timing?
Yeah, so I think Case Study Buddy, when we sold it, was just about 8 years old. And so it started as this concept like off the side of our desks. And then I had kids, and that kind of pushed me to start thinking differently about how I spent my time for money. I wanted to maintain, we loved, especially with our first, like I had so much flexibility. I could go and speak and the whole family could go. And that was our way of like traveling and seeing places. But all of a sudden when your time's not really yours and my whole motivation started to change. Like where before I was like, I want to grind and make as much as I can and like build my reputation. Once Linus showed up, then it was different. It's like, oh, okay. I started to kind of learn like, yeah, I can't keep doing things the way that I have. I actually value my time differently. I want to be more present here. And so the kind of, switch flips, like, if I can build something scalable, something bigger than me, maybe that will free up some time, and maybe it will give me an asset that one day I could sell or step out of, or, so you start thinking longer term in terms of like legacy and retirement and that kind of thing. It was like, well, maybe this could be, a ticket to a different way of coming at business. My girl Wesley, was born throughout the chaos of Case Study Buddy. I think she came along right when things were really starting to get intense and turbulent. We were growing quite a lot. And then my last Fisher, he's just over a year now. He arrived right as I was, by the time I'd kind of mentally committed, like I need to change from the change I've created. And so, they're kind of milestones for that business. Linus was there at the beginning, Wesley kind of in the middle, as I started to get a reality check on what I'd actually created for myself. And then Fisher at the end, when it's like, no, this can't continue either.
And what was it for you that had you say this can't continue?
I was doing some executive coaching actually. And that was like the first clue. Was I was having a conversation, and I'd had a really bad week, and I was feeling really down because, and it was this was with Linus. He was 3, and we were just, typical, like, butting heads on. It was nap time, and he didn't want to sleep, and I had a lot to do, and I was responsible for putting him down, and it just turned into this shouting match. And I felt like I lost control in that moment, and I didn't like it. There was never any, like, abuse or anything like that, but like when you find yourself slamming the door on a 3-year-old, like it's not a good feeling. And so I was talking with my coach at the time, and I was saying, like, I don't ever want to do that again. It was enough for me to recognize, like, something is off. And from that moment, unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the story, because I did wind up doing things like that again. I was bringing stress and anxiety and things home already there. I just didn't really realize that was what was going on. But kind of 2 Aprils ago, or like, so that, that, I'll rewind. So that started to be like a bit of a catalyst for like, I'm not as happy as I think I am here.
What were some of the other signals for you that something was off? Because there's probably other guys out there that they might not quite have that awareness yet, but looking back in hindsight, it was probably more clear to you.
I think, conversations with my wife, I think it was unintentionally hurtful how often I would be on my phone, and it would be like, you're here, but you're not really here. I know other dads who've heard that, and that's been a bit of a wake up call for them. It was, an inability to shut off for the weekend. My mind would just be going on work or on a problem or on a challenge, and I'd find it really difficult to be present, even in times where, like, work wasn't, I didn't have to be working, I didn't have to be thinking about it. I found it very hard to switch off. I found myself in a place of withdrawing a bit, internally, and I think that became a challenge. And then, just on the whole, though, the big thing for me was just this recognition of, like, I had never been an angry person. That was not really in my nature. And then I found myself in a period where it was like, my fuse is really short. Things that were just merely inconvenient, I was treating like they were a catastrophe, right? Like, your kid spilling a glass of water on the ground is inconvenient, but when your response to that is like outsized, and you're way more frustrated at that situation, like when you're more than the context calls for, it's like, where's that coming from, right? And so, a few years right around that time, when I had that conversation, I started taking some steps that, like, I think were really helpful. I started doing things like meditation, and, like, when the pandemic hit, I decided to go. It was never an abuse issue, but I decided to go alcohol free. I'm like, I just want to see if I can, because I feel like being stuck at home, this could, like, morph into some really gross habits. So, for almost 2 years, I didn't have a drop, and I felt a lot better. And some of these mindfulness things, they were really helpful, and there was a lot of meaningful change. And then when the market started to turn, and I got thrown right back into the thick of business again, and some of those things dropped to the wayside, it, like clockers, right back to, my fuse is short. I'm not present where I want to be. I'm constant. My mind is racing. I'm having trouble sleeping. Like, my sleep patterns were terrible. And I think another sign, I don't know if it's necessarily universal, but like when the Germans have a word for it and I don't know it, but I wish I could remember it. But like when you're using your nighttime to like make up for all of the like personal time or fun time you're not having during the day, again, it's like, what's happening here? Like there's just a total misalignment of time and energy and all of that. But by far the biggest thing was just like my reaction to things that were not emergencies or actual, they were merely inconvenient. My response just like for the context was like way here. It was like, so that was the biggest clue, I think, by far. And then I wasn't happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for myself, I mean, it sounds like burnout or parts of burnout, but also just fit and stuff like that. But I know when I've been burnt out, that was the big clue for me. Like I think one time I just got super emotional. I was like, what was that? Like that was weird. That's not normal. Let's take a closer look at that. We should figure out what's going on there. So yeah, you're noticing these things, you're feeling these things. You're just like, okay, something's got to change. Was there a clear decision point, Dave, for you? And like, what was that like if there was?
Yeah, I think there was. So 2022, so Fisher was born in November. So like when I found out we were pregnant with Fisher, that was kind of a catalyst. I had already had conversations with myself about like I knew on some level that something needed to change, but Fisher's birth kind of gave it an end date for me. It's kind of like I don't want to bring another kid into this environment. Like I don't want this to be the me that he knows from the time he opens his eyes. Like and so I had wrestled with it, and my partner and I had worked to try to improve things and turn things around. And there was a lot going on in the business. But kind of by, April of 2022, I'd reached a point where I was like, or April of, yeah, because I sold March of last year. So kind of by April 22, I'd sort of planted a flag and said like, I want to be done, and I want to be done by November, because that's when he's due. And so I think mentally, I'd quit and rejoin the company about 1,000 times, but knowing that he was coming was a catalyst to just say like, enough's enough. This isn't right, and this isn't who I want to be. This is not how I want to show up. And I think the other piece of it too is I didn't really take time away when Wesley was born. And I think that's one of my biggest regrets is like, I was sort of away, but not really. And I didn't want to do that again either. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to put myself and my wife through that again. So yeah, April of that year was when I told my partner, like, I think, I need to be done. And then things happened in the business. A lot changed really quickly. And by January, that decision basically became a non-negotiable. Like we were in a position where it's like, hey, we can either really knuckle under and bend ourselves in half and like keep going, or we can sell and move on. And at that point, like my partner and I both were just like in a place where we weren't happy. There was a lot of like physical, I think health is the thing I haven't talked about yet, but like my it wasn't just the mental health and like unhappiness and dissatisfaction, but like physically things had gone into, like, I ran a mountain race. I had trained for it. Things had gone really well. I was probably in like the best, coming out of the pandemic, I was probably in the best physical condition I've been in years. And then just as abruptly as like I'd gotten to that point, things all fell apart again, So that's a long answer to the question, but that April was like the time where I knew. And then the January stuff kind of forced the issue. And then by, like I say, March we'd sold, and May I was all the way out.
Yeah. And you said we hadn't really talked about the health stuff yet. What were some of the things that you noticed there or happened for you?
Yeah, if I had hair, I probably would have lost it. But it's a laundry list of stuff. Lower back pain from sitting too much. I had like, again, my sleep schedule was all over the map, and like with 3 kids, you're going to have that anyways. But even to a worse degree, part of it was habit, part of it wasn't. Weight gain, anxiety. I didn't have any issues with anxiety till I was like 28 years old. I was not like I've always felt stress physically, but it never came out as like a situation where I would have to like physically retreat and like deal with it. And the frequency of that just got more and more and more, the older I got through my 30s. So, things like that. But yeah, those were primarily the things. I think I also like just stress contributes to everything. And so, I can't pin it on the business or I can't pin it on the situation, but like I had just some weird nerve stuff start showing up in my one foot after that mountain race, stuck around for 8 months and then started to morph and change. And, stress doesn't help any of that. And then when you're not prioritizing getting up and moving and being out, that. And then, I think every now and then I would oscillate between feeling pretty depressed and being like pretty, again, motivated, and like it was back and forth like a whipsaw. And so there'd be days where like literally, I'd have to end my day at like 2 p.m. and go just like sit in the bath, and like I didn't want to do anything, just like sit. And like, you tell yourself it's because you're a tired parent or you're carrying a lot, and those things can be true. But I think again, it was just like mentally checking out, and the body kind of leading the brain to be like, stop, like take a minute here.
Like,
So
yeah.
yeah.
When are you going to listen to me? But like the body's like, when are you going to listen to me? Like, pay attention.
Yeah.
I
But
know.
it's tough too, because again, like, especially as entrepreneurs, there's this like incredibly stupid, unrealistic echo chamber. Like my least favorite meme I've ever seen is that stupid picture of like the two people with the pickaxes in the diamond mine, and like one guy is sadly trotting away when he's got like an inch left, and the other guy's like just keeping on going to get the diamonds. And like, what a stupid message we send to people that like, if you quit, it's not grit. Like, that's one of the things I had to unpack so much after, like, first to get to the point that I was okay walking away from the business. And then the second was after revisiting my relationship to it. Because, like, this whole stupid notion that, like, if you ever quit anything or give up on anything, you're not gritty or you don't have perseverance is, like, so bogus. Everybody should read the book Quitting by Annie Duke, or Quit by Annie Duke, because, like, man, do we need that forcefully shaken out of our heads. Like, sometimes the very best thing you can do is lay down the hand and leave the table. And thankfully, I had people in my, like my dad, to kind of share that, like, or again, like it wasn't my executive coach, but another friend who is one, when I was debating all of this decision, I called him and I said, like, this is what's going on. And where he challenged me is like, well, why haven't you left yet? And I'm like, well, I want to be able to say that I had grit. I want to be able to say that I like stuck it out. And he's like, Joel, you felt like leaving for 2 years and you're still there. Like, if that's not grit, I don't know what is. You're no longer in grit territory. This is just stupid. And it took that outside perspective for me to see that and to change that belief. But I hate that notion that, like, if you walk or if you move on, you're not gritty. Like, that's just not true.
Well, like even just listening to that, sometimes the grittiest, hardest thing is to say no and to quit. And I don't know, when I think of like the bigger picture and I zoom out, the grittier thing is to, or like if you're wanting to be in a sustainable place with the business or career or whatever it is, you have to play the long game. And if you're burning out and not in a capacity where you can do anything efficiently or effectively, yeah, it's probably like counterproductive.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you've now sold the business, you're out.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit of that journey of what's happened since then and what that's been like. Because I know I've talked to some other guys and it's discombobulating is the word I think some guys have shared.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to get your take on like where you are right now, but also like what's happened in between that, like actual sale time and like when it all went through.
Yeah. So for me, the minute we had a deal, it was just like immediate visceral relief. Like the day that the deal closed and everything was settled, I came out of my office and like my wife had gone and gotten, like, my parents were over, my wife had gone and gotten cupcakes, and my kids and all of us had just like a little mini celebration. And so I think for everyone it was like the first exhale of many. It like wasn't the end of the story, but like it was the first feeling was relief. Like, this was not the ending that I wanted. This isn't the way I saw things going. Again, when I spoke earlier, it's like the plan here was for this thing to potentially be an asset that I could, make retirement money off of or step out of and have run. And that, I didn't walk away with nothing, but that didn't wind up being the case. So the first feeling though was a relief. And then it took, I kind of was able to take the summer to just unclench. It was kind of like a process of like unlearning and letting go.
What were you unlearning?
Yeah, I think, like, first of all, there's still, even when there's relief, there's still, like, I think grief that comes alongside it, or like a mourning period, because this was something that, I think I didn't realize until later, because I was so ready to be done, how much I would still feel sad for the loss of like this thing that you would put time into and energy into, and kind of like the death of a dream, right? And then, again, a lot of, for me, I've always wrapped a lot of myself up in what I do and who I am and how I provide and all of that. And so when you get to a place where it's like, okay, well, who am I now? Right? I had the double whammy of like the field that I left to build Case Study Buddy changed dramatically in the 3-4 years that I was working exclusively on that. Copywriting in the advent of AI is like a very different game. And so, a lot of, it's not that the job's not needed, but it looks very different. Expectations are different. Like in the 0% interest era, making 200, 300,000 a year was easy, when you're specialized as a solopreneur, but that's changed. And so there's kind of this period too where like, okay, well, I'm spending the summer, number one, unclenching and like trying to spend my time the way that I had wanted to, with my kids, decompressing, playing through my backlog of video games, reading books, getting out and moving and walking, and like, trying to use that time well. And so I was going through that. And at the same time, there's kind of this like lingering in the back of my mind question of identity. So it's like, well, who am I now? Right? Like, my voice to this community, am I still relevant to this audience? Because again, I had spent a lot of time, I've been on stages, I've been able to speak. It's a bit of a head game when for years you've had companies like that you never dreamed you would work with. Facebook Marketplace came to us, HubSpot came to us, like big billion-dollar brands, and all of a sudden your inbox is dead quiet because even you don't know what you do now. And that started to, even in the midst of relief and unclenching and spending my time differently, it started to eat at me a little bit. And then it really kind of hit a fever pitch when my kids went back to school, because all of a sudden it's like, okay, I've been so used to having even if it wasn't a routine I liked, I was so used to having a routine. I get up, I go to my desk, I work for this time, I work on this, I do that. And when all of a sudden in your family, you're the only person without a routine, that doesn't feel great. At least it didn't for me. It was kind of like, oh, okay, my kids are up and out the door and going to school. My wife is getting her stuff done and doing her thing. And, it was kind of like that moment in Office Space where it's like, what exactly do you do here? And that's, me sitting across the desk from me. And so, I would say there was guilt and there was concern and there was, like, we were fortunate in that, like, it didn't buy us, retirement, but it certainly bought me time. And so, like, you have this urgency to get back to something, but what is that thing? And so that was kind of the maelstrom of things I was feeling. And where I'm at now is I did this cohort with a guy named Sunit Bhatt. He's an awesome guy. It's called Find and Evolve Your Purpose. And it came to me at just sort of the right time where, I was able to kind of figure out an exchange with him. And basically the whole premise of this is like, how do you get clear on what you want and what comes next? And I had been, I'd have conversations with my wife about the things I was dealing with, but I was almost like in the business groups I was a part of, I was almost like ashamed to bring it up, like that I don't know what I'm doing next. And that was my frame of reference. But in this cohort, I kind of had the opportunity to like zoom out and ask myself questions about what lights me up and what am I happy and proud of and what am I not yet satisfied with. And going through that gave me some clarity, some clarity that like, hey, there are other things I want to do. There are other strengths I've like underdeveloped. And so the biggest thing I walked away with, though, to like cap this long monologue off, is like, I'm trying to treat this season of life now, what's giving me joy and meaning, is I'm trying to treat this period now as a series of experiments. As someone who has grown up and operated in a very perfectionistic way, like that's hard. You steer away from things even if the possibility of failure is there, but I'm trying to allow myself to just, number one, try things. Number two, do something that I felt like I hadn't done, which is just book calls with people with no agenda, just because you want to meet them. That's how we met.
Yeah.
Just to talk about an idea or like learn from them. And that's been very like life-giving and joy-bringing too. So I'm in a place of, looking now to the future as less of like, I have to make the next thing the thing, and more like, how can I meet as many interesting people as possible? And how can I make my next things just experiments? How can I allow myself to view it that way?
Yeah. What's been the coolest result or impact of some of those random calls and connections that you've made?
I can think of two. I think, one of the projects I had an idea for, and the one that, I talked with you about, having come out of this whole experience of like, I'm not the dad that I want to be, and knowing that like there's this, like moms are really good at generally building community for themselves and seeking out advice and connecting with others. Statistically, women are still much more likely than men to like get counseling or therapy or any of those things. And having got, part of my journey was getting counseling and that kind of thing, but part of it was like a curiosity and a recognition of like, there's kind of a dearth of stuff for dads. And so I had this idea that I shared with someone that said, well, what if we could kind of have an event that's like half just getting guys out of the house to do something fun, go for wings or go snowboarding or whatever. And then the other half is having someone come in and share an idea or share, like a counselor, a therapist, executive coach, whatever, have someone come in and share something pertinent that kind of equips dads more for, and I think you call it like the mental fitness side of things, less like here's how to change a diaper, more like here's how to deal with stress and anxiety and how to not bring that home, or like child psychologist, like here's how your kids' brains develop and like what's a reasonable expectation. And so I started sharing that idea, and through that I got connected with people that I didn't ever know, but like are doing really cool things. Like Dustin Hogan's got this awesome initiative, therapy for dudes, a whole practice built around it. And, I sat down with another entrepreneur here in Calgary because I just said, I'm kind of figuring my next thing. And he hadn't even heard that idea yet, but we went for a drink and I just shared this thing I was working on. And he's like, well, that sounds really cool. I'm actually about to walk away from my business for very similar reasons. And he said, and you may not know this, but I've been running, like he runs these meetups in my city. It's a different theme. He's like, I've done events. Like if you need someone to help out with the event side of things, I'd love to, I'd be really interested in that. So just like these serendipitous connections that I like otherwise wouldn't have made. Or like the other one, part of what I've been like, you asked what I've been unlearning. Like before, again, I would measure my value by like how much I could get done or what I could produce or what I could create. And when there's no set motion, like you feel like you're stuck. And so part of what I have spent this season doing is just allowing myself to become a student again. And one of those things I've been learning is like the AI side of things and building out workflows and just kind of something I've been interested in and passionate about, but never made time for. And I got an introduction through Sunit to this woman in town. No agenda at all. Just like, hey, you two should be both good people. And I think it'd be good for you to meet. And on the back of that call, I got to introduce her to a friend who's like in the fractional space and they're getting on famously. And she introduced me to someone who is like a technical whiz on the AI front, wants to build something, but doesn't want to do it alone. And like he and I are going to sit down for coffee next Wednesday. So it's kind of just like fun to see these serendipitous threads, the things that emerge when you like don't try to put an agenda on everything and you kind of give yourself space to not know and be okay with not knowing. And so those are some of the cool things that have come out of like what is it's been uncomfortable and different, but like a good season in its own way for me.
It's funny. I think I have a call with Dustin I haven't met him before, but somebody introduced us, and I'm pretty sure it was that guy. So I think I'm chatting with him next week, which is
Nice.
cool. So more threads crossing in our conversation. And I think what's coming up for me is this, it's really awkward and weird to slow down and be in a space of not knowing. Because for most of us, you go to school, you get a job, you go to university, you get a job, you're in a business, like you're always kind of doing something, and there's some kind of guardrails or like bumpers with how you structure your time and what that looks like. And nobody's ever taught us to unlearn or to like reframe the default system that we've been in to do something different, and yeah, to play in a space of like uncertainty and just awareness of like trying to find the little threads.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about like what's changed for you in this, that's allowed you to like see threads or like pick up on it. Like what's your like radar system like now, and how has that kind of come about?
I think I'm still learning that myself. Like one of the promises I made to myself, because I'd spent so much of my career not wanting to be in a place of like public vulnerability or asking for help. I took a lot of like pride in having the answers versus needing the answers. And so, something that I wasn't good at was asking for help or saying like, reaching out to people. And now I'm trying to do that by default. If I find something interesting or, there's something I want to explore, I've just tried to put myself in a position of like, yeah, like who can I meet that like already does this or knows something about this or like, would be interested in sharing. And so there's been that side of things that's been really helpful. I think there's also been for me a recognition of like some people like are very good at knowing their value intrinsically, and like that has not historically been me. I've always kind of needed some sort of outside validation, or just like, I get way more gas out of someone else recognizing that something is interesting or good about me or that I'm doing, even though that's something I continue to work on. So finding ways to take the things that I had already done and create these little micro moments. Like I sort of thought, okay, well, I've done this, I've built a business. I've gone from like solopreneur to having a team. And I wish someone had been there to like warn me of all the mines in the minefield. So like maybe I could do that in consulting calls. And so I thought, well, I'll try to make that a moment for me. Like I'll try to validate, do other people see this as something that I'm good at too? So I put it out there. I did 2 Facebook posts. I booked 18 calls. And so it was for me, again, like a big reminder. And that was at like 400, 450 US a pop. Like I was, I was just, it was a really important reminder for me. People will hear that and go, oh, there's no way you didn't know, or, stop bragging. But for me, it was genuinely like, I needed to remind myself tangibly, like, you are good at this. You do have something to say. And so creating space for that, I think, was really important too. And then the other part of it is like, I had this moment, 2 moments I'll share. Like 3-4 weeks ago, I had this moment where it just struck me like a lightning bolt, and it was so clear and so dumb. I was like, I have said to so many people out loud, I wish I could just have a season to like, again, like catch up on the books I haven't read and like take some courses, and like it's so dumb to realize like, buddy, you're in it now. Like if not now, then when, right? And so again, allowing myself to define this season by something other than how much I'm bringing in or like what I am building, but instead make it about what I am learning. I think that was really important. And then 2 weeks ago, coming back from this vacation to celebrate my dad's 70th, part of, I talked about routine, and something I've really been struggling with since Fisher was born is like it necessarily changed our routine. Someone's always got to be home because Fisher's having a nap. And that's tough because if I want to go to a library to work, or I can't. It's not like it used to be. And I really was grappling with that and was frustrated by it, and was letting it make me a little bit sour. And so coming back from that vacation where, again, you have no schedule, I finally kind of sat down and took out a pen and paper and said, I'm going to write down the realities I can't change like, this is where I'm at now. These things are not, there's no amount of willpower or like grit or grind that's going to move these things into a different place. And so I had to take a moment to just write down, these are my realities right now that I cannot change. And here's how I'm going to adapt to them. Instead of trying to just layer the same mold on top of the same mold, instead of getting frustrated that I can't do the things that I used to, like, here's how I'm going to change. And that was helpful for me too. So, there's lots to that, but I think reminding myself that I am good at things, giving myself permission to just be a learner and put a different title in front of my name, and sharing the journey and the conversation with other people, reminding yourself you're not alone and it's okay not to know. You're not an idiot for not knowing. Like, those have helped me see the threads. And then allowing joy to be an indicator on the dashboard again. Like, when I feel like I'm viscerally excited about something, that's a good indication of, okay, I want to find the threads here, instead of being forced to like make something work.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of nuggets in some of the things you just shared. And I made a couple notes because I want to loop back to them. One was this sense of measuring success and value. And when you don't have a business or like actively in a job, you completely have to shift what that measure is. And I see that time and time again of like what you measure has a big impact on our self-worth and self-love. So you got to be really careful with what you're anchoring to. But the other thing that really caught my attention too is how funny it is when we talk so much about wanting something. Like, oh, I'd love a season of chilling and learning and just like integrating things that I'm spend time on. And then when it actually happens, you're like, whoa, like almost like not recognizing that it's actually happening, first of all.
Yeah.
But when you do, it's like, oh, maybe it's not what I expected. So
Totally.
it's just funny how much we do actually end up getting what we ask for, but sometimes it just looks a little bit different when it shows up.
Yeah.
But the last point, this joy, allowing joy to be a bit of a signal for you. What currently is bringing joy?
Yeah, I mean, again, every time I talk about that dad's idea and I hear from other people that they're seeing the same things and they're excited to be involved in it and they see the potential in it. And I think on some level, the knowledge for me that like the core of that idea is not commercial. Like, yes, I do think there's a business opportunity to it, but more than that, I just want it to exist because I think it'll create a lot of meaningful like conversation and opportunity. That brings me joy. I think the other thing was just when you meet someone who's like sees things in the same way, like having this conversation with this person, even if it goes nowhere, to have been like having an interest in this AI side of things and seeing an opportunity, and to meet someone who's just like as fired up and excited about as you are, and then also fills a big gap on like the potential to make that real. That to me was just like, man, like there really could be something to this. And it's something different than what I've done in the past, but I see again, like there's some joy to seeing like there might be something to this that could lead to what's next. So those are things there. The other thing is like redefining success, and like I continue to work on stress and anxiety and the short fuse and all of it. It's not like that magically evaporated the minute I left the business, but to see and reflect on how much time I've been able to spend with Fisher, and like through this period that you don't ever get any period back, but this period that you never ever get back, this is for sure, barring some accidental miracle, our last kid. And I've been able to be present for all of it. And that brings me joy. To see my daughter in her Christmas play today and like be able to just drop everything and go, yesterday we jailbroke my kid out of school and took him to this like Santa's village thing and had him jump in the ball pit. And like, those things, sometimes I need to get dragged there through the nose to really get it. But like those things, bring me joy as well. So yeah, it's a lot more through conversation or through moments, or again, like it does bring me joy to see the potential in something again, and to realize like, no, that motivation can come back. I'm not lazy. I'm not unmotivated. I'm not whatever you want to fill that gap with just because I'm not working on something now. And then finally, there was something really edifying for me in being able to have those calls and those conversations with people and to have an answer again, but it coming from a different place, not of arrogance or not wanting to be vulnerable, but being excited to help someone because you can see over the hill where they can't see, or like you're almost there. You really do almost have this. Um, you know, being able to like flex that coaching, helping, advising kind of muscle has brought a lot of joy too.
It's awesome. There's something there too about that recovery stage, I think, after a big transition or exit or whatever it is, where there's a lot of burnout. It's like giving that space to heal and make sense of what's happened. Because I think I've chatted with some other guys too. Some people have done what you have, where they've had a bit of space and they're figuring out what's next. But some people just jump right into the next thing. And I think that can be a dangerous spot to be in, where it's like you don't have any sense making, you don't learn or integrate what you've been learning or from that experience before. And on that note, I'm curious, got a couple more questions here and then we'll probably wrap up. What legacy or learning would you like to share with your kids? Like, you've gone through this being a dad, being an entrepreneur. What would be some of like the wisdoms or things that you'd want to transfer to your kids about this experience?
I think number one, like, do your best, but it's okay to quit. Like, I want them to know that like it's okay to change your mind, and that changing your mind is actually strength. It's not weakness. It's okay to recognize when something just isn't for you anymore, and to be okay with that. I think, biologically we're wired to feel uncomfortable, threatened, even angry sometimes when we're forced to change our mind, or the world we know is challenged. But I want them to know like that's okay. I think the second thing, all the cliches are true, but like the second thing is like the only thing you never can get back. I think there's actually potentially two things, but you can never get back time. And so, be ruthless about how you spend it. And then the other thing that you may not ever get back is relationships. You can damage a relationship to the point that it never goes back to the way it was. And, I'm grateful that I had the presence of mind and awareness to recognize early where I didn't want to wind up. And I'm grateful to have a partner in my wife and, people around me that encouraged me as I tried to build back. Something that someone said to me is like, rupture is inevitable, repair is optional. Like with your kids as a parent, like you are going to have those bad days and those bad moments. You are going to have those times where you're not who you want to be, or you take things too far, or you're showing up wrong. So rupture is inevitable, but you can choose to sit down with your kid, and you can choose to apologize to your kid, or break the fourth wall and call out what's actually happening. Or, and again, the legacy I would want to leave there is like, it's so, I think exactly that, like, yeah, rupture is inevitable, but repair is optional, and choose to do it. Like, you are not perfect. That's okay. Things will go wrong. But if you care, like, show up. I want my kids to know, and I'm sure they do. I want them to understand, like, dad's not perfect. He's working on it, and he cares enough to like be real with us about that. Even that, obviously you can't dump your whole emotional load on a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 1-year-old, but like in appropriate ways that, I want them to know, like, I'm not perfect, but I'm doing my best to show up for you. And then I think the final thing would just be like, in all things, like joy should be an indicator on the dashboard light. Like, let that be just as important to you as money or validation or, whatever. Like, you should be able to have a conversation with yourself. And when you truly deeply know that something, that you're not happy, be brave enough to change it. And it took me a long time to make that change. And my hope for my kids would be not that they're wishy-washy and change the minute things get hard, but that they'd have the recognition of like, when is the spark not just like flickering, it's out, and be okay to let that be an indicator of like something has to change.
Yeah. There's something to be said for that discernment of what is something that's just hard and you need to gut through, and what is something that's no longer a fit or something that you need to let go of. And I don't know if there's any way to know that through a book or like somebody sharing it with you. It's more just experience of doing a bit of both.
Yeah.
But I think that is one of the hard learnings in life, is to know that distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it is so hard, right? And for me, part of what was helpful was the conversation of like, let's assume we snapped our fingers and this problem you're facing right now was solved. Like, how would you feel about whatever was coming next? And when the answer was, I still wouldn't be excited about this, then it's like, okay, that was for me. But it is so hard to know that. I think you have to kind of live through it. But I do think you need to surround yourself with voices of people who see you and know you and can tell. I think other people often can tell the difference too, right? Like my dad was so good at seeing that for me and so good at giving me permission to be like, you don't have to do this, like reminding me of that. So I think that's where having good people around you is really useful too.
'Cause it's such a slow downhill slope. It doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, and you don't see the decline. And having somebody outside you, sometimes like I've had it where it was I hadn't seen my brother in a little bit, and at Christmas he looked over at me. He's like, "Dude, you look like a shell of a man," and I was like, oh, like gut punch, but also like I don't disagree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Final question for you today. If you were to listen to this recording in 6 months, what's something that you'd want to remind yourself of down the road?
I think it's something I have to remind myself of every day. And that's like, it's okay if it's experiments. It's okay if it's a series of experiments, like that won't be as powerful for everybody. But for me, that's a big deal because while other people have no problem trying a bit of this, trying a bit of that, it's just like some people can allow things to just spring up and fail and move on and spring up and fail and move on. I think I just want to remind myself like the next thing doesn't have to be the thing and just treat it like a grand experiment. And I think that would be really meaningful and helpful. And I think for some other people, maybe the same. Like, can we look at life as a series of adventures and experiments instead of, feeling like, well, I've gone off the rails in this particular path, and now I need to desperately get back on another line, or I'm going to be lost. Like, can you get to a place of being okay with just letting it be an adventure? Yeah.
And maybe even enjoying being a bit lost.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. That's, I think, again, for some people that comes so natural, but for me, it's something I have to like mentally, gear myself towards, but I'm excited to do it. And I hope 6 months from now, I can look back on this season and say, I really did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to reach out or have an idea for you? And what might be some ideas that you'd be looking for, people that you'd want to connect to if they're listening?
Yeah. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't always respond quickly, but I do always respond. And don't find me on Facebook. I'm not active there. Don't try to add me on Instagram. It's like it's all walled off. I'm on Twitter, but like increasingly less. But LinkedIn's probably the best place. But yeah, I mean, I'm as I try to flesh out these ideas, and one of the experiments is this whole idea for. It started as this idea for events, and now it's morphed into a newsletter and a podcast. I think it may morph again into like a physical print letter that I mail out. But I'd love to meet people who are doing interesting things in the space of mental health and parenting, specifically dads, whether that's counseling, therapy, psychology, anything really. I learn a lot, and I'm excited to see how other people are kind of navigating and unpacking that stuff.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, thank you.